All right, everybody. Today we're going to be taking our first set of notes in government. So, all of our notes will be organized with a number up here at the top on the front slide. So, they'll be numbered 1.1. 1 is the first unit, so it'll be Unit 1, and these are their first set of notes, so they're 1.1. The next set of notes will be 1.2, 1.3, and so on. Unit 2 will be 2.1, Unit 3 will be 3.1. That's how they'll go. For each set of notes, you do need to have a title and you need to have an essential question. You'll take your notes and then you'll have a summary at the end, but I'll remind you about that later. You are all about to leave high school. You're about to be done here. No one's going to tell you how to take notes once you get to college, so I'm going to let you decide what kind of notes you want to take. I do believe that Cornell notes are the best way to take your notes, but these are your notes, so I'm going to let you take them as you wish. If you want to do them on paper, you can, and just take a picture and upload it. If you want to type them in a document, that's fine as well. We're going to turn them all in at the end of the unit on the day we take our test. So I'm going to go ahead and present these slides now. And I'm going to turn on the closed caption so they're there at the bottom. All right, so notes 1.1, Principles of Government. Your essential question: what is the purpose of the government in the United States? Because I prefer Cornell notes, I will have guiding questions here throughout our notes. For each different section, I'll have questions. You do not have to write these down. Anything that's underlined, I think, is the most important, but again, they are your notes, so write down what you will. So what is the government? The government is the institution through which a society makes and enforces its public policies. The state can be defined as having these 4 characteristics. So population, obviously, any state must have people. Territory, it has to have land, some sort of recognized territory, which brings us to sovereignty. So each state is sovereign. It has the power within its own territory, and it gets to decide what's foreign and what's domestic policy. And it has to have a government as well. So the state is not just a state as in California. The state can be determined as a government. So it's politically organized. Where did the state come from? There are 4 different theories that we're going to look at here. Force theory. Force theory would argue that a small group of people took control of an area and forced all within it to submit to that person or that group's rule. Force theory, very violent approach to government. Evolutionary theory would argue that the state has evolved naturally out of the early family. If you think about your family also has some sort of government structure within it. Whoever it is you live with, there's rules that you abide by. How do those happen? How do those come about? So that's evolutionary. Divine right theory. Anything that's divine usually means it comes from God. So divine right theory thinks that people deserve to rule because they were born, they have a divine right to rule. And the social contract theory. If any of you have ever taken AVID, you've probably heard of the social contract before. So that means the state rose out of a voluntary act of free people. That's a democracy. The purpose of our government specifically is described in the first paragraph of the Constitution. The first paragraph is kind of like the introductory paragraph, like any of the paragraphs, any of the essays you've ever written. The preamble has the same thing. And there states, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." And there is a Schoolhouse Rock video about this, so I'm going to go ahead and show that to you now.
Hey, do you know about the USA? Do you know about the government? Can you tell me about the Constitution? Hey, learn about the USA. In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers did agree to write a list of principles for keeping people free. The USA was just starting out, a whole brand new country. And so our people spelled it out, the things that we should be. And they put those principles down on paper and called it the Constitution. And it's been helping us run our country ever since then. The first part of the Constitution is called the Preamble and tells what those founding fathers set out to do. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare at hand, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. In 1787, I'm told our founding fathers all sat down and wrote a list of principles that's known the world around. The USA was just starting out a whole brand new country. And so our people spelled it out. They wanted a land of liberty. And the preamble goes like this. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America, for the United States of America.
All right, so forms of government, our next section. So again, these are just some guiding questions. If you like to write Cornell notes and want to have questions on the left-hand side in your column, you can add those in there. So governments can be classified by 3 different standards. Number 1, who can participate in the government? Number 2, the distribution of government power. And number 3, the relationship between the lawmaking and the law executing branches. So in our government, that's called the legislative and executive branches of government. So democracy has the political power in the people. A direct democracy exists where the will of the people is translated directly into law by the people themselves. So it's one person, it's one vote. Everybody has to participate. That means every time there's a new law, every time there's a budget that's crafted, every person in that democracy would have to go and show up and vote. So obviously, because our country is so enormous, we don't have the possibility to do that. So we have a republic or an indirect democracy. And this is where we vote for representatives to go and make those decisions for us. They get to go and decide how taxes are spent. They get to go and craft new laws. So they express the popular will of the people. Other government systems that are out there in the world that you've probably learned about in your history classes. Dictatorships, that's where those who rule cannot be held responsible to the will of people. An autocracy, a single person holds unlimited power, and an oligarchy, the power to rule is held by a small, self-appointed group of elite people in society. For a unitary government, all the powers are held by one small central agency. A confederate government is an alliance of independent states. Those of you who learned about the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America during the Civil War, that's the Confederate government you might be aware of. Or a federal government has the powers divided between central government and several local governments. So this is what we have. We have a division of power between the federal government in Washington, D.C., and then all of our states have governments as well, like right here in Sacramento. So this kind of just shows you how different democracies are formed in the United States. This is how we have it on the left-hand side here. Our voters get to choose who's in the legislative branch, so who's in our Congress, and who's in the executive branch here. So who our president is and the president's cabinet. In England, they have a parliamentary system, so their voters get to choose who's in the legislative branch, and then the legislative branch actually chooses the chief executive. The basic concepts of democracy. So, our basic concepts, our foundations, are that every person has worth and dignity. We believe in equality of all persons. We believe in majority rule, but also protecting minority rights. And the belief that compromise is necessary in order for our government to function. And then we also have to have individual freedoms that are protected. The free enterprise system is the kind of economy we have, so we'll get more into this when we start econ in late October. But this is where people are allowed to have private ownership, or corporations can own capital goods, and we have private decisions on our economic system. So you get to decide how you spend your money rather than the state controlling that for you. Decisions in the free enterprise system are determined by the law of supply and demand. So it's actually what the economy says, not what the government says necessarily on how we spend our money. We also have some government regulation. So we are a mixed economy because the government still is involved in our economic system through taxes, through things like minimum wage, child labor laws, environmental regulations on pollution, things like that. Okay, and our last slide here is about democracy and the internet. Democracy demands that the people are widely informed about their government. That's why all of you have to take a government class right now, because a democracy only works with an informed population. So, theoretically, the internet would make us all smarter about participating in our democracy. It's easier, we all can find information as soon as we want it. But what we learned in the 2016 presidential election is that we have a lot of hackers out on the internet. We have a lot of misinformation that's being spread. All the data on the internet is not necessarily true. And unfortunately, our older populations, our populations who use things like Facebook, they tend to spread misinformation widely and quickly. And hopefully, your generation will do better about that than older generations have done before. And that's the end of your notes. So go ahead and write a summary at the end. You need a couple of sentences describing what it is you learned in this set of notes.